Completing an APT Thinking Skills. When we complete an assessment and planning tool, we make three lists. The first is unhelpful or challenging behaviors. The second is problems to be solved. And the third is thinking skills. In this video, we're going to focus on the third list, the thinking skills list. So why do we assess thinking skills? Why do we make this list? In my mind, there are two main reasons for this. The first is that it helps to shift people, us, and caregivers or whoever we're doing the APT with. It helps to shift them from conventional wisdom thinking to CPS philosophy, right? To the belief that people do well if they can. And it does this by promoting compassion and understanding and that skill, not will thinking, right? If you're focusing on identifying what are the lagging skills that are getting in the way for this person, what are the lagging skills that are causing this challenging behavior, that are making it difficult for them to manage whatever the problems to be solved are that are coming up for them, then you are naturally focusing attention on skill deficits rather than a deficit of motivation, right? Skill, not will. And so, especially if you're working with someone who is having trouble with that philosophy shift, who is, really conventional wisdom, focusing on this list can help with that shift for them. The second thing that it does is it helps us consider or identify what scaffolding, what supports a person might need until they can strengthen their thinking skills. So if we can identify the particular lagging skills, like the biggest lagging skills that they have, then we know that there are some things that we can do to help them with those things. So for example, if understanding what others are saying or following the flow of conversation is a big lagging skill for them, if they're really slow at processing information, then we know that we have to go slowly with them. We have to give them, one direction at a time or one concept at a time. We might have to use smaller words, smaller sentences, right? Just give them little chunks of information. Maybe do things that help their comprehension, like writing things down for them or, making pictures or something. Anyway, there's lots of things that we can do to scaffold or support around each individual lagging skill. So it helps us to identify those and to think about that. So how do we know what thinking skills are lagging? Well, the best way to do it is to work backwards from the problems to be solved. So you have your list of problems to be solved because that's the second list that you make, and this is the third. And so you want to look at each problem and ask yourself, what skills do I wish this person had that would help them manage this problem better, right? And and just consider what are the main lagging skills that have, caused them to not be able to handle this problem to be solved. And remember, these are just your best guesses. So, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be right on target. You're getting to know the person. You're going to discover more lagging skills as you go along, or discover maybe they have more skill than you thought in some areas. But this is basically the why behind. The lagging skill is why the challenging behaviors are happening, because if the person had those skills, they could handle things and they wouldn't have challenging behaviors, right? So the problem to be solved is the when the challenging behavior is happening, and the lagging skill is the why. So let's think of some examples. If you took a problem to be solved and thought about, okay, what skills do I wish they had, right? That they could manage this better. Here's some examples of that. And keep in mind, it could be different for every person, right? If you and I had the same problem to be solved, we might have different legging skills that made it hard for us to manage that. So it's really an individualized way of thinking about what's going on for them. So, if the problem to be solved is when a peer in his class calls him a sissy when they're shooting baskets in gym class, thinking about that particular kid, right? Maybe we come up with handling feelings when angry or frustrated, one of those emotion regulation skills. Maybe that's super hard. And so, when he's called a sissy, he gets angry and frustrated, and we see the behaviors because he can't handle those feelings. And maybe pausing before he responds is also a difficulty. And so that impulsivity, when he gets angry and frustrated, he can't handle his feelings, and then he impulsively responds with some challenging behavior. So maybe those are two of the lagging skills. Let's think about another one. So the problem to be solved is when her mom says she can't go meet her friends downtown on Saturday. So maybe one of the lagging skills is not taking things too personally. Maybe, it's a cognitive flexibility skill. Maybe it's, mom has already made arrangements with grandma that the whole family's coming over on Saturday. And so, sorry, you can't go meet your friends downtown. But she is, getting all upset because she's taking that really personally, but it's not really about her. Maybe handling feelings when disappointed, right? Another emotion regulation skill is hard for her. And so, she's sad, disappointed that she can't meet her friends. It's hard to handle that. We see the behavior. Let's think of another example. When their caregiver asks them to make their bed in the morning before having breakfast. So maybe this is hard because it's hard for them to stay focused during activities, right? They're pretty distractible, and it's, to kind of focus on making the bed and getting it all the, different pieces of that done, is hard. And so they don't make it all the way, or they don't, they forget, or they get it halfway, and then they go off and do something else. So staying focused is the lagging skill there. Maybe understanding other people's points of view is hard for them. And so they don't really care if their bed is made, but for some reason their caregiver really cares about that. And their caregiver, it's really important to them to have their house looking neat and tidy every day. And so, but that's not something that the youth is taking into account. And so maybe that is the lagging skill that's causing them to not be able to, not do what they're expected in this case. Completing the assigned math worksheet and turning it into the teacher the next day. So that's the problem to be solved, the expectation. So maybe ignoring distractions is hard. Maybe it's just hard to sit down and focus on the math worksheet and get it done because there's always something else going on, and it's kind of a busy environment at home during homework time, and they can't ignore distractions enough to really focus and get the worksheet done. Maybe keeping track of time is hard, and so maybe they, don't consider how long it's going to take to do the worksheet, or they don't consider, before they know it, the day is over and it's bedtime, and they haven't done the worksheet, and they didn't even, think about it, or, keep track of time enough to know that they had to stop and do that before bedtime. So those could be the lagging skills. So hopefully that helps you to understand how you can take a problem to be solved and really think about, okay, what skill is getting in the way? What skill is, the one or two or three or whatever that make this really hard for this person. So when you look at the APT in Guidetree, the second page is the thinking skills page. And it's laid out, it has all the thinking skills listed in the 5 categories broken down. And then there's 2 columns of check boxes. And one is marked Y, and that's where you should put the youth's lagging skills. You should check the skills that are lagging for them. And really checking the biggest or most troublesome lagging skills. I would encourage you to think about what lagging skills are showing up throughout a lot of those problems to be solved or more than one? Um, or what are the ones that cause the most issues for that youth? Because I think you could look at this list for some kids and say, oh, all of them should be checked, right? But that isn't very useful to have all of them checked. So we really want to narrow it down to the biggest or most troublesome lagging skills. And then that other column, that O column, is for another person in the youth's life. If there is one, you don't always have to use that column, but it's there in case you want to. And so maybe it's a caregiver, or maybe it's a sibling, or somebody else in the youth's life that you want to think about what are their lagging skills, because you have some challenging behaviors and some problems to be solved on your list, on your APT for them. And so you want to think about what are their lagging skills as well. And then it's really interesting sometimes to see two people's lagging skills side by side, because you can see how their lagging skills interact with one another and sometimes amplify one another, right? So in that O equals blank section, just put who you did the other skills for, if you did that. So, mom or sister or whatever, you just write that in the O space just so, we can know who the O is. So hopefully that is helpful to understand how to assess the thinking skills on the APT.